technical things. Hello, and welcome to the Graphic Novel of the Month Club, the adult edition for the month of July. I am really happy about this book and our guest. The book is The Secret of Superhuman Strength, and our guest is the amazing Alison Bechdel, who is right there. Hi, Alison. How are you this evening?
Hello. I am tip-top, Brian. How are you?
I'm good. I'm feeling good. Thank you. I'm sorry for focusing so much on the old stuff. I'm fascinated by a lot of this, and a lot of this, sort of history has kind of gone away. And
no, I'm down with it. That's I don't feel like anyone's really that interested anymore, and I fear I really am going to lose my memories of it all. So this is good.
Yeah. Well, it's one of the reasons I want to talk about things like this. Because I do think that people care. Actually, I think people care tremendously. They just don't know that they care yet. If you see what I mean.
Okay.
At what point did you start to make your living fully as a cartoonist? Was it after the first Dykes book was published?
It was definitely after that. I think it was even after the second book was published. Might have been between the second and third books that I finally quit my job at the newspaper and stepped out on my own.
Yeah,
was 1990. I was 30 years old.
Yeah, was that scary? Was it liberating?
It was very scary. It was a tricky thing to do. I really didn't, have a cushion. And I was at this point where I knew I suspected very strongly that I could do this. I could make my money just doing my own work, but I didn't have enough time to do the work because I still had this other job. So it was very much this leap of faith that I had to take. Absolutely. If I'm going to believe in myself, I'm going to quit the job and make it happen. And that was daunting to do, but I did it.
Yeah. So 1990, and when did Fun Home come out? 2006. Okay. So there's a 15-16 year period in there before you went to become a full-fledged graphic novelist. What was that period like, I guess? Because it seems to me that a lot of the sources and the papers that you were working for were not sure things, right? There was a lot of uncertainty about the whole process. Am I wrong about that impression?
No. I mean, there were a few of those newspapers that were really solid and paid me well for all those years, but most of them were fly-by-nights. They'd start up, they'd fold, they wouldn't have money to pay me. So it was a very interesting period, that 15-year stretch. It was like an uphill and then a downhill trajectory. At first, there were more and more papers. There were more and more gay bookstores and more women's bookstores. And, as this community cohered, there was demand for my stuff, which was great. Mm-hmm. And I just kept doing a little better each year. Mm-hmm. And that was true until maybe the late 90s. And then it started slowly going the other way. And it was partly the internet, having an impact on this whole scene. It was partly just gay and lesbian culture shifting, where people, there were started to be some really fancy, glossy gay and lesbian magazines that, weren't the kind of place where my comic strip would run. And so the culture was changing.
Was it more mainstreaming? Is that?
It was I'm thinking of Out magazine, which was kind of.
I was thinking the same thing. Yeah.
Like the gay version of Vanity Fair, and there was always a celebrity on the cover, and it was very, it was a glossy. Mm-hmm, So as we got this more kind of surface legitimacy. The ragtag edges started to drop off, and I was on that ragtag edge. I began losing papers and losing income, and it was eventually even my my small feminist press that published my books went bankrupt.
Yeah.
So it was around 1999, 2000, that I began working on this other side project, this memoir project about my dad. And I just kept working on that and kind of putting as much energy into that as I could while this other stuff was starting to crumble. And fortunately for me, it was a gamble that paid off. You know, it's just very lucky.
Yeah. What did I want to ask?
I remember actually just before Fun Home was came off the press, I lost my biggest gay and lesbian venue, which was Planet Out, this wonderful website that used to come out.
Travel website, right? Yeah.
It was just a general thing in the early days. Might have turned into a travel website. But it was funny that it was that so close. I often felt like I got rescued off the deck of a sinking ship by the helicopter of the graphic novel craze.
Yeah. Was it exciting though that things were becoming more mainstream, and so you weren't quite an outsider anymore, and yet you can't make a living? I don't know. I'm just trying to fathom sort of that period between one state and the other.
I was very bitter in that period, you know, because I wasn't making it at that point, you know. I was, you know, fading into the margins even more than I had been.
Sure.
And that was frustrating because I felt like my work was getting better. I felt like my work was really good. And actually, in fact, this brings us back to the alt weekly thing. I had started making some inroads into the alt weekly world, which showed me that straight people were willing to read this cartoon about a bunch of lesbians. And that was very exciting to me. So it was just ironic and sad that I just started at that point when the work was really getting out there and getting good, that it was becoming less feasible, you know?
Yeah. It's funny because, you know, this afternoon, just to prep for this, I sort of read all 1,000 pages that you've drawn in books. It was a lot to read, but Dykes is not, I mean, it's obviously, it is very gay content, but it's not, it seems so mainstream to me today. Do you know what I mean? Like it's not out there. It's not like pushing an agenda. It's what you see on television. It's what you see in the world everywhere.
Yeah, but just the fact that these people were out and, you know, not apologetic about who they were, just living their lives as a matter of course, that wouldn't fly for a long time. It started to be okay, but and I lived through that, and in a way, the comic strip was about that cultural shift. The characters are always commenting on it and participating in it.
Sure. There's a lot of people who watch this series who want to make comics, who want to do comics. They haven't quite figured it out in their heads. They don't quite know where to go. What's the piece of advice that you would give someone who wants a career in comics? And it doesn't have to be, it can be philosophical, it can be craft-based, it can be anything you want. It can even be whatever it is.
I guess I would say find a reader, even if it's just one person. Maybe you'll find a group of readers, that would be great, but find people like not you who can look at your stuff and give you feedback, and you'll know if they like it. I think it's hard to work in a vacuum, and it's tempting to work in a vacuum because you don't want to risk rejection or failure, but you have to get yourself out there. So find a way to find a reader who you feel safe with.
Sure, especially when you're doing 200 pages at once.